So, Danny, what do you study?
So I study a number of different things, but if I was going to group them into classifications, I would say my primary research interests right now are thinking about health as it relates to multiple dimensions of our correction system, and policing and how to best understand variability in policing across officers and places, and identify when there's problems within police departments.
What are some of the most interesting findings that your research has shown?
The most interesting thing that I've done in general is forcing health to be paid attention to in corrections. And I've shown that health, for example, a person's health affects whether or not they recidivate, particularly mental health. So if we have individuals who exit prison, if their mental health is decent and they're able to increase their mental health and maybe get some services when they exit prison, they're far less likely to recidivate, which is really important for understanding and stopping the cycle back and forth to prison. And additionally, understanding how health is related to outcomes even within prison. Some of my recent work on the pandemic within prisons has shown that we need to be thinking about correctional systems, the whole system, not just prisoners and their health, but also staff members and the community at large, and how these three groups of people in prison, staff members, and the outside community impact each other, especially with regards to infectious diseases.
If someone were to write a headline on your research finding, what would it be?
That correctional officers are driving the pandemic within prisons.
Can you explain that a little more?
Within prisons, right, the people that go in and out of the prison every day at the end of their shift are correctional officers. And those individuals are subject to the infectious dynamics within the prison, right, which is kind of a very difficult setting to control infections. Prisons have been associated with infectious diseases for like the beginning of time, because you have a whole bunch of people in a very small space. So it's very easy to pass diseases back and forth in that space. So the correctional officers interact with that space. They interact with the individuals in prison, but they also interact with the community at large at the end of their shift, where they live, where they go pick up their coffee, things like that. So they are this kind of a node in between spreading infections from the community to the prison and back out. So in that sense, COVID entered prison in some way, right? Most of prisons had, at the beginning of the pandemic, they'd locked down visiting and outside contract staff, and even visits with lawyers and whatnot. So the only people going in and out of the prison were the correctional staff. So you can see in some of the work that I've done that subsequent waves of the pandemic, as we've had multiple waves in our country, you can see correctional officers' health and infections increase first, and then you see prisoner infections increase second. And it's really clear that waves of COVID coming into the prison are being driven by the correctional officers getting infected themselves and spreading it.
Why did you decide to become a professor?
I always wanted to teach. So I was one of kind of those classic undergraduates that didn't know what they wanted to do, and started out with 4 different majors. And over time, I realized I wanted to teach. And I had spent some time when I was in college being a teacher's aide in a special education classroom, and I enjoyed that, but I wasn't in love with it. And then I did some tutoring of high school students also while in college. And again, it was okay, but I wasn't in love with it, but I still enjoyed the teaching part. And then when I was an undergrad, I had the opportunity to work at one of our learning centers And it gave me the opportunity to have my own like small 8-person classes of college students. And that's pretty much when I fell in love with that age group and decided, well, if I'm going to teach this age group of college goers, I have to go get a degree and become a professor. And along that ride, right, like of trying to figure out who I like to teach and the age groups I like to teach, I also fell in love with research. So it was really clear to me that the combination of the age group I wanted to teach coupled with enjoying research, that there was really only one career path for me, which was being a professor. So
That's great. So what's the best advice you could give students, or what's the best advice you've ever had?
I don't think I got a lot of advice per se. But I think if I was advice giving students is that for those students that are at a research university like ASU, that there's far more happening at the university than just classes. And there's opportunities to be involved in research that will help you with job applications, give you real job skills that relate to, any number of jobs in the criminal justice system, from police officer to parole officer to nonprofit data analyst. And getting exposed to research can really help you gain those skills, but also show you this completely other side of university life that really drives creativity and intellectual work at the university. So not to be only focused on classes while you're here, but rather to dip your toe in the water of research and get involved with your professor's research, and explore kind of this multifaceted nature of a research university. If I hadn't done that as an undergraduate, I might have had a completely different career, because if I wasn't an undergrad researcher, I don't think I would have fallen in love with research the way that I have, and it would have really changed what I decided to do.
You're first gen college attendee or graduate, aren't you?
Yes.
So do you ever kind of take a moment to reflect on your trajectory? How's it feel to be where you are and given where you started?
It's surreal. It's like many first gen students, you have a family that doesn't understand what you do because nobody else does it. I am first generation college goer, and only one other person in my family has gotten a degree since. So it's just the two of us, so to speak, in the family. And it's really strange to see, that I came from community college and not really knowing how to do this process to kind of being involved in all aspects of university life. And I think the thing that feels really good about being a first gen scholar, particularly at ASU, is because ASU has a ton of first gen students. So I feel like I'm serving a population of people that had an experience very similar to mine, or are having an experience that is similar to mine. And I feel really strongly about giving those individuals opportunities so that they're not stuck in the, idea that, well, I'll just get a job, I'll get to college and I'll get a job and it'll help me, but really like thinking about it from a more expansive lens where there's far more opportunities out there than you think, right? First gens don't get that exposure to all of the opportunities that are kind of sitting at their doorstep. So it's really crazy to be a first gen student and then be a professor teaching a lot of first gen students. And I think it's one of the best parts of my job, is being able to kind of give that information and give that experience back to my students and know what they're going through, and kind of help them see and experience a lot of other elements of university life that might be able to change their trajectory, or just expose them to new things because they're not getting it through their background. And it's really satisfying and fun.
All right, last question. What's your secret skill?
I actually am really crafty. So I make a ton of crafts. When I was a graduate student, I had a side business of making jewelry, and going to craft markets and selling, the jewelry that I made, and the crafts that I made. I can knit, I can crochet, I make cards, I make jewelry, stuff like that. I just, so I guess I'm crafty, and I can
That's
do a
great.
lot of different things, and I enjoy it because it's another way of being creative and having fun, that isn't necessarily tied to being creative and research and things like that. So